Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. I'm your host, Amanda, and my amazing co-host is...
Hello, I'm Megan.
Hey, hey. All right, so we are your source for messy, imperfect homeschool advice and community. We love homeschooling our respective kiddos, and we genuinely wouldn't have it any other way. But that does not change the fact that some days are really freaking hard, okay? And we just want to share the balanced insight into our homeschool journey and just kind of life in general. That way, when you have one of those rough days, you aren't as inclined to beat yourself up about it and think, well, everyone else seems to have their shit together. What's wrong with me? That's not happening here.
Yeah, no, true story, right? Homeschooling is just like anything else. Like, there are lots of great times, and then there are days where you just need the day to end so you can go off and cry with a bag of Dove chocolates. I might be speaking from experience. So yeah, beyond offering you reassurance that even on your worst day, you're still doing a great job. And we know that because you're here listening to a homeschool podcast, trying to be an amazing homeschool parent and learn more and grow. So you're doing a great job. The other thing you can expect from us are secular and progressive views. Oftentimes, the loudest voices in the homeschooling community are those who refuse to acknowledge their privilege, teach their kids a narrative about the history of the earth that has been proven false so many times over, but it suits their religious beliefs, and just so much more. So if that's not your jam, it can be super hard to find people that you align with in the homeschool community.
And that sucks. It's so hard. Finding like-minded community helps in most, if not all, maybe facets of your life. It can be challenging if you don't have a sounding board or just others around you who get it and understand where you're coming from. So if you've struggled to find your people, if you have been struggling to find your people, let us leave you with no doubt where we stand. Okay. We believe that love makes a family. Full stop. We believe that women should have autonomy over their own body. We don't care who is peeing in the bathroom stall next to us, nor do we care what gender they were assigned at birth. It does not matter. Safety first, everything else, whatever. We believe vaccines save lives. We believe no human being is illegal. And we will continue to utter the words, fuck ICE, any chance we get.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, did you know that ICE was created after 9/11? And I firmly believe that if we created it in recent history, we can dismantle it in current history. That's all I'll say about that right there.
Did know that because there's a thing on Netflix, I think it's called Turning Point, and it's about 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's 4 episodes, if I'm not mistaken. I watched it a really long time ago. The first one is very typical 9/11 documentary style, where it's what we all know. What's really interesting is a lot of times that's where those documentaries end. The remaining episodes, 2 or 3 episodes that come after that, are about all of the unprecedented legal stuff that came up after 9/11 that was, tapping phone calls and Guantanamo and all that stuff is in there, where they're like, oh, well, there's no legal precedent for this, so we're just going to do whatever the hell we want and go for it. And so there's a lot of stuff in there that I was just like, holy macaroni. So if you haven't watched it, must watch, especially if you have teens or even really mature tweens. It would be a really awesome homeschool day. If it's a snowy day or a rainy day, get a blankie and watch that, and you're going to have some really deep discussions. But anyway, if everything Amanda said sounds like it's your jam, welcome, relax, settle in. We promise we will not lull you into a false sense of security and then catch you off guard with some sort of racist dog whistle. We've both been there within the homeschool community. Things are going well, and then you're like, well, there goes that, right? So it happens too much, too many times. So we fully acknowledge the world is an absolute mess right now. But our goal today is to take your mind off of the fall of democracy for just a little bit and chat homeschooling, if you're up for a little homeschool adventure with us.
Yeah. So, okay. Again, we talk about keeping it real and transparency and all of that. I'm going to put this out there before we get any further in this episode. I am struggling more and more to compartmentalize these days. the whole, like, it's time to box up those feelings of outrage and despair. And now I need to focus on work or on homeschooling. That is getting harder and harder.
Hmm.
But I am going to do my best today, right now, because I also firmly believe that we all need breaks and self care. This fight isn't a sprint, it isn't even a marathon. It's long and hard. And without taking care of ourselves, we will 100% burn out before it's done. So we're all going to work on that together. And I apologize ahead of time if my rage and despair leaks through as we talk other things. There we are. I'll try.
Given today's topic, it might. Okay.
Yeah. We'll see. So last week, we had the chance to interview Tess from the Coalition for Responsible Home Education. If you haven't heard that one, you should totally go back and give it a listen. You can do that now or after you're done listening to this episode. Truly, it doesn't matter, and we don't care which one you listen to it in or what order you listen to it in. But it's definitely worth giving a listen, because this week's discussion will be sort of a continuation of that episode, as we're going to continue talking about just homeschool oversight and regulation, kind of in general, and the thoughts that the two of us have from very different perspectives. But like we said, we do like to keep it real, and we usually do that with a weekly update on life, homeschooling and otherwise. Just that we aren't influencers. This is the reality. Some weeks are great. Some weeks are a dumpster fire. So has it been a great week or a dumpster fire week in your world, Megan?
Well, I mean, to your point, I'm compartmentalizing the fall of democracy out. I mean, that part, obviously, dumpster fire, not good at all. Yeah. So aside from that, because that's just bad, and we all know that's happening. Aside from that, I talked a few weeks ago about hitting the reset button for myself this year after a really rough year last year of moving and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm continuing on that journey, and I've been painting our apartment, which I'm super excited about. I have been experimenting with what I refer to as maximalism light. I feel like when I'm done in a couple of weeks, because I've got a whole bunch of stuff up in the air right now, I'm going to post some pictures to our Patreon and see, like, I feel like I might almost qualify as a baby maximalist by the time I'm done. Like,
No, but you can you can think so.
I bought a really cute penguin door pull on Etsy today that I'm super excited about. I mean, I'm going there. I'm adding character. So I'm pretty excited. So I've come to podcasting today looking a little bit rough and totally in my sweats because I've been painting the hallway and I'm loving it. It's colorful and it's bright and it's making me happy. So yeah, it is what it is. So I'm super excited about that. My daughter got a new teacher this week in Portuguese school, and because she's leveled up to the next level and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, I thought it was really cool from a homeschooling perspective because she's been going to intensive Portuguese for weeks and weeks, 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. She comes home, she has homework every day, all that. And we're very loosey-goosey unschoolers. We haven't been formal in a lot of our approach, but she did get a 2-year degree. And so she's used to having classes at a certain time, having assignments, and she's done that thing. This isn't completely foreign to her. So anyway, she had this first teacher and she liked her. She was making progress and she was doing her homework and going to class and enjoying class. Now she's with this new teacher and it's a totally different experience. His approach to teaching is just very, very different. It's more relaxed, more conversational. They play games on Fridays. So yesterday they played this game. It's kind of like Pictionary, but it required one person to describe something to a person who was drawing and then everybody else to guess, but all in Portuguese. So they've been doing a lot of prepositions and stuff like that. So it was a lot of like, put this next to this and behind that. And, oh, okay, like a circle here and put this on top of that. And it's a shoe or it's a table or it's a book or whatever. And so she came home last night and she was just buzzing about school. She was so excited. And she goes, it's kind of like homeschooling, where what I was doing before felt more like traditional school where it was worksheets and stuff, but we weren't applying it in the same way. And she's like, now I feel a little bit more like I'm in the homeschooled version of Portuguese school where it's casual and it's broken down and it's applicable and we're using it and we're having fun. So I was like, I love that she made that connection and was like, the better version for her is what feels like homeschooling and feels like she's putting things into place and she's not just doing worksheets for the sake of doing worksheets and whatever. And I was like, whoo, tiny little win there. That felt really, really nice. So I was pretty happy about that. And then, yeah, I've been reading a ton. It's been preventing my doom scroll quite so much, which needed to happen. I'm still doom scrolling. I'm still staying up to date on what's going on in the world. But yeah, I'm doing a book bingo this year with a bunch of late middle school, early high school students. And so it's been great because I have my full bingo card filled out of all the books I'm going to read. And they just finish one, go to the next one, finish one, go to the, and I'm like, this is great. It's keeping me off Instagram, which needs to happen right now. So yeah, so it's good. What about you, Amanda?
Yeah, the same, right? Like anything related to life in the real world is a dumpster fire. We've been having some really difficult conversations in our home here recently. Those like, how do we make sure that we all have passport ID cards to be carrying on us, especially those family members who are not white? And like making sure that we just have some plans and some really challenging discussions. And that sucks. I mean, like
Yeah.
it sucks to be having to have those kinds of conversations. It is what it is. And especially if you are listening and you or your family are not white presenting, I would encourage you to think about doing that. They're really advocating people not carry their passports because we see a lot of these interactions where things are being taken from people or they're really aggressive and things are getting lost and you need your passport, but losing your passport ID card is not such a big deal. And it is one of the few forms of identification that they are accepting. So worth thinking about if you don't have one. And if you do have one, pull it out of the lockbox.
Can I
What
ask
were
a
you going to say?
question? Because so I don't have a passport ID card, but my husband does, which is great since he's the non-white one between us, although he's not in the US right now. And I'm very thankful for that. But his passport and stuff was always paid for by work because he had to have it to travel. So it was an expensible thing. So he would get both. We don't have that, me and the kids. Can you get a passport ID card without having a passport, or is it an add-on? I'm just thinking financially from like it's so expensive to get a passport. Can you just get a passport card?
I am not sure if you can just get a passport card without getting the actual book.
Okay.
I know the passport card is a more affordable add-on over the
Hmm.
price of a passport. Or if you have your passport and you don't have the passport ID card, you don't have to wait until renewal. You can just go online and fill out a form and get the extra passport ID card. So
Okay.
I will not pretend to know for sure what to do if you don't have a passport. And I
Okay.
realize it's not easy. I know when I first got my passport way back when I was in college, right? I got denied like 3 times. I can
Did
only
you?
imagine. I did, yeah, over and over because of name issues. And I grew up in a really small town. So finding the original birth certificate was this whole thing. And then things didn't match. And it was all, I know it's not easy and it's also very expensive.
Yeah.
So, but if you have one or you have the ability to, definitely look into the passport ID card. So yeah, dumpster fire there. Homeschooling wise, things are okay. We're slowly getting back into the swing of things. For anyone who is keeping tabs, I did get a few loads of laundry done. It did not include the laundry from Bali from November, so that's still outstanding. The Christmas cookies have not been made, so they are very much looking like they're going to be Valentine's Day cookies. At this point, they might be St. Patrick's Day cookies. I don't know. This week coming up, we have a behind the scenes tour booked for JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. So I'm super excited about that. I think the kiddo's really going to enjoy that. And then he wants to do a tour of Caltech. So we have not been able to arrange like an actual tour from someone. I was really trying to find someone. There's got to be people at Caltech who know about homeschooling and are connected and would be happy to meet with a homeschooler and share that perspective. I just haven't been able to find it. So they have information on how to do like a self-guided tour. We'll probably just end up doing that. But yeah, so, finding the little things that we're looking forward to in the middle of all the other stuff. It is what it is. It's living in these times.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So homeschool regulations.
Here's a
Things are
light
a
topic
dumpster
for the
fire.
day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Things are a dumpster fire. Let's talk about one of those like really touchy subjects in the homeschool world. True story. We can already hear the potential objections. Not even the potential objections. We've seen them, right? Because we've been advertising last week's episode. It's the whole it's a slippery slope. That's a logical fallacy, by the way. And if you want some curriculum that teaches about that, Brain Food from Hearth and Story is a great one. I don't want government involvement, especially not when it comes to this administration. I mean, look, we were just talking about the importance of getting passport IDs because my family is not white. I get that. There are concerns. And I'm not going to pretend that this is easy or straightforward. But I do think as progressive homeschoolers who care about evidence-based education and facts, we have a responsibility to have these hard discussions and be honest about a lot of things that we haven't maybe been terribly honest about.
Hey. Okay. Oh, here we go. Okay. Right. So Amanda's talked about regulations before. This is not new and earth-shattering in her world, but this whole rabbit hole of doing episodes about this kind of kicked off. I think it was New Year's Day. I was getting caught up on some stuff, and I was scrolling in this Facebook group where someone had shared a New York Times article written by a man and a former homeschooler named Stephen Merrill Block. And there's been other articles. The Atlantic just had one about him or by him or whatever, because he's written a book that just came out. And so all of this is kind of linked to the publicity around this book. And I fully take credit for the fact that I saw this thing, because Amanda does not lurk in these Southern homeschool groups that I do that are overrun by the opposite of like-minded homeschoolers. So I see all the ick and then screenshot a selection for her sometimes. And but the caption that went along with the hey, look at this article wasn't like, hey, here's some food for thought. What do you all think? It was super duper negative, of course. So I read the article, which I'm a rabbit hole person. So then I was like, oh, the Coalition for Responsible Home Education. Oh, there's a book. Let me download the audiobook and listen to that while I'm walking the dog, and went down into this whole thing, right? But in the original New York Times article, this is a quote from the article that Stephen Merrill Block wrote. Let's just call him Stefan from now on. Okay. It's like we're friends. Okay. It's too much. Too many names. Okay. So it says,
you can be his friend. I'll be his frenemy. Okay. So there's that.
Not a fan. Okay. So it says, in 48 states, registered sex offenders and adults with a conviction of crimes against minors can still homeschool a child, effectively removing the child from the observation of other adults and peers, even if that child's safety is under active investigation by Child Protective Services. In 12 states, including Texas, and he says that because he was homeschooled in Texas, I have also homeschooled in Texas. So in 12 states, including Texas, parents aren't required to submit any documentation to homeschool. They can simply remove a child from the school, and then they will no longer be subject to any mandatory state assessments or contacts with officials. In another 17 states, families are required to provide notice to the state of their intention to homeschool, but they too face no state-mandated assessments. In 19 of the remaining 21 states that do have laws requiring assessments of homeschooled children, the laws are not enforced in all situations. In 49 states, homeschooling parents are not required to have their children screened for medical issues or ensure that they receive care. In 40 states, homeschooling parents are not required to have a high school diploma. And that's just a piece of the article, but I was like, okay, we need to have this conversation because that's really bad.
Yeah, I mean, I think that these stats are appalling, and I'm not sure who is reading these stats or listening to these stats and being like, yeah, that's okay. That's totally cool. And so, I mean, these numbers, they are definitely a part of why I have always been pro-regulation when it comes to homeschooling. So, yeah, for me, when Megan was like, I have thoughts and concerns because some of the things she was seeing online, and I was like, sure, we can talk about that and do an episode.
Congratulations on catching up. Welcome to the club.
I mean, I was kind of like, but I'm going to be way more pro-regulation than you are, right? Where this is going and how this episode's going to shake out. I was like, yeah, no, I think it's okay. So we'll see. We'll see if it's okay. Or if the podcast is done at the end of this episode.
And we're so close to the end of season 3 and making it to season 4. Darn. Right? Yeah. Oh, goodness. Yeah. I mean, to no one's surprise, I have not always been on board with regulations. And well, I hear the logical argument. I see the need. Okay. I totally get it. I don't want them to apply to me. And I know that that's not how society works. That is not how that's not how this whole thing works. I get that. But
It just reminds me of that meme or like the small snippet reel that goes around all the time of the old lady who's got the pictures and all of the strings on her wall. And she's like, I have it on my Facebook wall. And I'm like, that's not how that works. That's not how any of that works.
yeah, exactly. Right. So I totally get it. I think part of my hesitation is because we're unschoolers. Amanda's an aggressive academic homeschooler. No matter what regulation they throw at her, she's going to easily nail whatever the thing is. For me, it's going to be like, what do you mean your kid learned math through woodworking, 3D printing, photography? Like, you know what I mean? It's like, huh? Right? How is that? How is that a thing? And so for me, I can envision myself in a world of regulations where I'm constantly having to educate the person who's doing the regulating to advocate for our right to take the road less traveled. So there are so many people in the homeschool community that have this visceral reaction to just the idea of homeschool regulation. And so I'll be flat out, like, it makes me uneasy too. But I totally see the need because I don't think people who are sex offenders should be able to homeschool their children. And we'll talk about even beyond that, because that should be a no-brainer, right? We'll talk more about that. So let's just kick off with the elephant in the room. We are never people who shy away from politics. We have built a podcast and a community around educating our kids using own voice materials, decolonized sources, which PS, anybody who listens to the podcast knows I'm a huge national parks fan. Did you see them pulling down those things in Philadelphia related to, I'm like, stop ruining the national parks, please. They're pulling down any references to slavery. And okay. So anyway, right. Our homeschool lives are political, whether we like it or not. And no matter which side you land on, it's political. So,
Well, I mean, it's a civil right to be able to homeschool even. So to be like, politics isn't home. Like, of course it is. Like, of course it is.
there's this trend right now on Instagram where it'll be somebody who makes soap and it'll be like, making soap is political because you can't make soap if they shoot you in the head. Everything is political because if you don't have the right to exist and to continue breathing in your country, yes. So, okay, here we are. How does our current political situation in the United States, and to some extent other countries as well, because this mind fuckery that we have going on in the United States with all of this immigrants are the worst and et cetera, and two genders and families are man and women and blah, blah, blah. That's spreading. It's taking over England in a really disgusting, divisive way. Germany had a far-right candidate last year that did way too good in their election season, right? But the US, of course, being
We
a
lead the
leader.
way.
Yeah, being a leader in the downfall of society. So, like, this is not good. A lot of people are homeschooling. How do homeschool regulations play into this situation? So, penny for your thoughts, Amanda?
Well, I mean, for me, I think on the one hand, it probably does complicate it more because with what is happening in the world right now, we do see a lot of new families coming to homeschool, being on the very opposite end of the current or more recent perspective on homeschooling. Homeschooling initially started fairly progressive and liberal, and then it was very quickly taken over by the very conservative, we want to bubble our kids from the government and reality and all of that stuff. And now we see this big influx of people who are homeschooling to make sure that they are teaching more accurate history and to protect their LGBTQIA plus kids, and just for lots of reasons like that. So I do think it's complicated. On the other hand, passing any sort of regulation takes so much time that from that perspective, I feel like it doesn't actually really play in. Like we have almost no regulation. And I think the basic fundamental regulations that need to be passed really like nationwide, almost at a federal level, are so basic and they will take so many years to get past that we don't really need to be worrying about these bigger, like, they're going to take away. I see it all the time in groups. They're going to take away our ability to homeschool. We can't even get them to say, hey, if you're convicted of domestic violence or child abuse, you can't homeschool. Like, if we can't get that, where are we going to get you can no longer homeschool? Uh,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there was a line in the article that I thought was interesting as it related to politics, where my friend Stefan said, he said, I would also characterize as abuse a parent's decision to limit a child's access to learning materials or to indoctrinate a child into one mindset or ideology without the possibility of other perspectives, or to willingly limit a child's ability to function in a larger society. And so this is part of my turning point for regulations beyond sex offenders homeschooling their children. We all, I think, watch those videos on social media. And gosh, I can never remember their names, but there's a couple of guys that their whole social media thing is that they would go and stand outside Trump rallies and ask people questions. And
Yeah.
the answers were just so idiotic and so stupid. Like the one where the people showed up in garbage bags. Have you seen that one?
I haven't
And
seen that one, but I've
my
seen a
God,
lot of them.
they showed up wearing garbage bags and they were like, "Oh, because somebody said we're Trump's garbage." And he's like, "So you're proving them right by wearing garbage bags?" And they were like, "Oh, right." Or the one with the mugshot that says never surrender. And they're like, "But he's surrender in the photo, in that exact photo." And so it's like, okay, and there's tons of those people that you see and they're like, I'm homeschooling because I don't want my kids learning all this woke shit in school and kids dressing up as cats and pooping in litter boxes, and which has been debunked like a million times over. That's happening, right? Isn't that indoctrinating children into an ideology that's a bubbled ideology? But how do you tell people that they can't do that? They're not breaking the law, but those kids are living in this environment where they're not being educated with facts. They're not being educated with science. They're not being educated with real history. And so it affects society as a whole because when they go out into the world, they don't have the ability to assimilate into the real world. Their worldview is now challenged and feeling threatened, which we're seeing the result of that is just fight back harder, put up a bigger defense. And so all of it to me is very alarming, but at the same time, you can't tell people that it's illegal to homeschool your kids that way. You can't do that. The biggest thing I think is always that religious exemption because people use it for the vaccines all the time in states where there's a vaccine mandate. And you see people too where they're like, oh, my husband might be getting a job in such and such a state. How do I get around vaccines in that state if I go homeschool there? So there's always going to be this thing where it's like, well, it violates my religious principles or this or that. And so to your point with the slippery slope, like how are we ever going to stop that ideology from becoming taught as fact, even though it's anything but? So I don't know, but I think in today's political climate, it's ridiculously dangerous that these kids are growing up isolated in these little clusters and this is their existence and this is their world. And so that's very scary to me because they're all going to be released out into the world as adults. And we see, I mean, JD Vance has come out and said very sharp things about higher education and university being liberal brainwashing. And it's like, no, that's just the real world. And so when they leave your cluster bubble and they're exposed to something else and they're like, oh, this isn't as scary as I thought it was going to be based upon what you told me. I mean, I had a bit of that. My parents aren't like racist, homophobic assholes, but I just went to school in a very religious environment. So it was a very sheltered worldview. And when I got out into the real world, it wasn't that I necessarily had been told things that were false. It was more that I didn't know about a whole world that existed beyond the one that I lived in. I just didn't even know it was there. And I felt very cheated in a way. That's not the right word, but just kind of like, why didn't anybody tell me that this existed? It sounds so stupid, but at 18 years old, I just didn't know that there was a socioeconomic existence other than the one that I lived. It was like, to me, that was what you saw on television in Calcutta or what you sent for 5 cents a day to a telethon on television. I didn't know that it was in my county. I had no clue. And so we
Yeah.
have this whole group of kids that are living. It's scary. It's so scary because it's growing.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in a really rural Midwestern conservative community. I was 100% raised that way. I went to church 3 times a week, RLDS for anyone who's listening and interested. And I went off to the big city for college. And
look what happened to you. Look at this.
exactly, that
You're a
woke
brainwashed
liberal ideology went way too far. And I think that part of that had to do with early exposure, not in a way of like, this is the way it is and you should learn this. But I did know, right, almost primarily from my public education, I did know that there were different things and other things out there. And I think exposure, we probably can't tell people that they can't teach a certain thing or way, but exposure makes a difference.
Mm.
And I think we'll probably talk about that a little later in the episode. But so last week, we interviewed Tess, and the concept of kids' rights came up. And for anyone who doesn't know, you should totally take a minute, do a little bit of a rabbit hole about children's rights in Europe. They have a charter. There's a whole bunch of things going on there around this idea that children have rights. Even as minor children, they have rights, and those rights should be upheld and protected. There's a lot of discussion in the homeschool world, especially the American-based homeschool world, whether you're in the United States or you're U.S. citizens living outside of the United States, but you're still wanting to homeschool and travel or live abroad and do this, right? There's a lot about the parents' rights to educate their children how they see fit or how they think is appropriate. But rarely does the conversation extend to the child's rights in this situation. We, as a podcast, have done episodes before about respecting our kids as a whole human, this idea that the parents shouldn't just say, because I said so, and those kinds of things. So we're not opposed. Kids' rights are not something that we're like, no, they shouldn't have rights. But at the same time, we definitely have not gone the other direction of really examining this idea of children's rights as a human charter and them being equal to or potentially even superseding parents' rights. I'm curious what your thoughts are when it comes to children's rights and how that commingles with education overall and then homeschool regulations as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I feel like we see comments sometimes from people who are like, my kid wants to stay in school, but I feel firmly that homeschooling would be the best choice for our family for XYZ reasons. And so it's hard because kids don't have always the long view that we have or the broad view that we have. So it is that mix of making sure that they feel seen and heard and validated, because that's how we operate. There's plenty of people who are like, it's not up to them, but that's not how we are. We've talked about that before on other episodes, like you said, but it is all about parents' rights right now. And so our kids' rights to have an education. And I don't think, especially in the unschooling world, which we talked a little bit about recently, we talked a little bit about with Tess, kind of that spectrum that exists in the unschooling world. And it was in Stefan's book as well, that his mother was committed to this idea of unschooling and that he would just figure it out and all this kind of stuff. And I don't know that you're going to have a kid who's allowed to play video games 24/7, who's going to be like, shouldn't I be reading Shakespeare? I don't know that you're going to have that because they don't know to ask or they don't understand the long-term implications of not having that. But yeah, they have a right, because how will they, this is, I struggle because I'm like, how do I say this without sounding judgmental? But I feel like there are some approaches to unschooling that might not necessarily prepare a child for the big world. And Amanda's probably like, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. And of course, there's instances of kids who had a really great academic education who also aren't prepared for the real world. So there's a lot of gray in all sorts of areas, but I'm kind of like, they do have a right to be prepared to launch into the world as as humans. And I don't necessarily know that all kids are getting that. So, yeah.
Well, and I think that that goes back to one of the things that we talked about last week when we were talking with Tess and their organization's focus on the fact that children have a right to an open future.
Mm,
This idea that parents should not be able to completely dictate that they aren't allowed to go out into the big wide world. And that's what we see in some of the most conservative, super far right homeschooling groups,
mhm.
especially when it comes to girls and young women. This idea that, like, well, we're raising you to not be able to go out into the real world, to not be able to figure out how to live in the
Yeah.
real world because we don't want you to know about that. And so the goal shifting, not from saying that's not okay, but from saying you should have access to the resources that prepare you for an open future. And if you choose to go that route, if you want to be a stay at home mom or you want to, whatever, that's okay. That's what an open future is, right? That ability to choose what works
Choices.
for you. Yeah.
Mhm.
If you want to be a stay at home mom, that's not the same thing as being a trad wife who was never given the option to do anything except be a trad wife, and if you want to
Mhm.
be a stay at home dad, that's fine too. Yeah. The open
Mhm.
future idea.
Yeah. I think that's a great way of putting it. I think that's what it boils down to. And our rights to make choices for our kids can't be in opposition of that because it violates their rights that have yet to be defined in a legal capacity in the United States. So there you have it. All right. If you have not seen it, John Oliver did an episode about homeschool regulations a couple of years ago now. We will link it. It's on YouTube, so we'll link it in the show notes for you. One of the coolest things in it for me is that Amber O'Neill Johnston, who's been on the podcast and who I fangirl over endlessly, we did a book club series on her book, like love her. There's a clip in there of her being interviewed talking about HSLDA and how it's kind of like this downside of homeschooling that you're stuck with, right? It's like the devil you know kind of situation, right? So totally worth watching. It's really, really good. The episode was torn to shreds in Facebook groups and
Every
media. And
homeschool group, almost every
yeah,
homeschool group I was in, they freaked the F out about the fact
yeah.
that, well, about everything in this episode, which again, for me is one of those things like, did you watch the episode? Did you actually watch the episode and listen? Because I don't know how anyone watched the episode and was like, he's so wrong. He's so wrong about everything.
Sex
Well, okay.
offenders should totally be allowed to homeschool their children. Of course.
I mean, there is no proof that people who have been convicted of domestic violence perpetuate further violence. Come on. Yeah, I mean, I actually just rewatched the episode last night with my family because first off, I want to be prepared before we do this episode, but I was also curious what my family thought. So it was an interesting watch. So I will say that kind of like off the top of the episode, he starts by talking about how parents were homeschooling during the pandemic. And I know that's like like a really touchy subject for you, Megan, because you're like, that they were not homeschooling. And for me, I think I'm somewhere a little bit more middle of the road because I do know of some, a lot, in fairness, parents who really did homeschool. They really took to homeschooling for one reason or another, and they were researching secular curriculum and really getting into doing it at home while they needed to be doing it at home. And because we live in a blue state where schools were shut down for much longer and we have friends who are progressive, I have one friend in particular who lived in Texas and they chose not to go back when the schools opened because one of their kiddos was immune compromised. They waited a couple of years before they sent them back and they were 100% homeschooling. I have some other friends who have continued to homeschool because during that time they embraced it. Maybe without the benefit of deschooling first. And I do think that there would have been some benefit with that, but they've still done a great job of homeschooling and sort of stepping back from public education and doing it a little differently. That said, I will say that there were a lot of parents who were not homeschooling, right? They were managing school at home. or managing really poorly prepared virtual school. That is not homeschooling. And if you're listening to us because you're like, I want to hear what these people have to say about homeschool regulation, please know that what happened during the pandemic is not what homeschooling actually is. That was a pandemic. It was a worldwide emergency where everyone did their best, but it was not in any way, shape, or form the norm.
Yeah. So he starts off with that. I like the fact too, he starts off with the fact that he acknowledges that homeschooling can be amazing and that it can be done very well. He's not anti-homeschool in this episode saying this is the worst and can't believe this is legal at all or anything like that.
Huh.
He does then bring up, though, heavily religion influenced curriculum like Abeka, BJU, etc. And the examples that we see out of those are not good. It's just like not stuff that you're like, I'm sorry. And I see Abeka in homeschool groups all the time, but it's not fact-based. It's not real. And it's in every subject that there's this influence out there. And it's like, I need a Christian influence for this. And okay, great. But there's what happened and there's facts. And then there's your version of them influenced by your religion. And they're not the same thing. They're just not. So okay. I love when you meet people who are like, we're Christians. We use secular curriculum and then we teach our kids our religion. And it's like, okay, we're not religion-y people, Amanda and I, but at least your kids are getting a secular education that's based on facts and that's based on reality. So, okay, great. He goes on to talk about this online community with 2,500 members that this one person started because she was struggling to find Nazi aligned curriculum. And so she starts this group called Achtung Amerikaner, which is like attention Americans, 2,500 people in this community who were like, yeah, we need more Nazi aligned curriculum. What the fuck, right? This is not okay. This is not good. I mean, if you haven't watched Shiny Happy People, we've talked about it before. You need to watch it on Amazon. Season 1 in particular deals mostly with homeschooling. There's the Duggars are in there, but then there's other examples too. They talk about HSLDA in there, which is the Homeschool Legal Defense Action in the United States. And they're a powerful political lobby group for conservative politics. And they're very well funded. And
very good at what they do. They're a lobby group and they are very good. They are very effective.
Yeah, but they're not fighting for children at all.
No,
they're fighting for conservative parents' rights to bubble their children is basically their main mission. Okay.
And one could argue they're just fighting for conservative ideology
in general,
across the board. Yeah, in general.
Yeah.
Right. And you see that in the John Oliver episode.
Yeah.
He shows where they're saying, look, our goal is to homeschool our children so that we can have a 5-4 vote in the Supreme Court to overturn Roe versus Wade and to finally get rid of this nonsense about same-sex marriage being acceptable. And they're not shy about the fact that that's part of their goal.
I watched the episode. I was like, HSLDA is the NRA of the homeschooling world. I mean, in Shiny Happy People, we had that example. There was, they highlighted this person, I think Madison Cawthorn from North Carolina. And there's this program that was created in this conservative ideology world called Generation Joshua. And their whole point was to teach these kids civics. It's a long game to take over and get the majority in government. Like Amanda was just saying, this isn't conspiracy theorist shit. It's a civics program for kids with the mindset of bringing conservative ideology to the U.S. government. And it's working, right? I mean, it's working. We're seeing it.
That you can't look at what's happening right now and not understand that they have succeeded far more than we should have allowed it. And this, we can't regulate homeschool in any way, shape, or form, has 100% fed into and supported their efforts and their mission.
Mm-hmm. Which is why I'm like, yeah, we got to fix something, but please leave me alone. I'm still stuck there. I'm stuck. We're going to get to what it might look like, but I'm stuck there. I get it. But yeah. And I will say, like, super duper important in the John Oliver episode is he acknowledges that any sort of government intervention or social services intervention or whatever division of regulation is created to oversee this would not be perfect. And that more scrutiny in particular would be challenging for those who, number one, aren't wealthy and number two, aren't white. And John Oliver fully acknowledges that in the episode.
Yeah. And I mean, the reality is it goes beyond challenging. It will be detrimental.
Hmm.
And we do need to address that. And that's a much bigger societal issue that isn't just about homeschooling. I think I've mentioned on the show before that we were foster parents here in California. It changed to resource parents a little while ago. And we were that. And I'm really happy with what we did. And we supported reunification. And we have expanded our family a lot in our time working in the foster care system here in California. That said, it is disgusting the amount of money that we received to care for someone else's child when if half of that money had gone to the birth parent in the challenging situation, their entire circumstances could have been turned around. If they had just had a little bit more support,
Hmm.
it could we could have eliminated so much trauma for those children, and the parents could have been so much better educated about how to parent. I mean, we took so many classes. They paid for us to take so many parenting classes and psychology classes and how to care for a sick baby classes and how to and all of these. If they just did any of that for these parents instead of just taking the kids away, it would have been a very, very different situation. The outcomes could be very different. The whole thing, the system really, really needs massive improvement. And if you don't like that, that's fine. You come at me. I firmly stand on that, just like I believe that we need more regulation in homeschooling. And so, this idea, we are seeing more families who are not wealthy, are not privileged, and are not white choosing to homeschool. And we do need to be very aware of how that plays out for those families because they are already at a major disadvantage. And CPS consistently is happy to give more money to the privileged and the white and yada yada yada, and it's an issue. I personally think it's one of those things, like, you can't wait for everything to be perfect before you start trying to fix something else. I don't believe that life works that way. I think you have to work from where you're at on a whole lot of fronts and work for improvement on a whole lot of fronts. And so that's where I stand on it. But we all need to be aware of it, especially if we're going to sit around in our privilege and be like, this needs to change.
Hmm. For sure. Yeah.
Okay, before we say anything else, we just want to take a quick minute. This is the time of year. It's late January when we're recording this. You'll actually listen to it in early February, but everyone is out there. Anyone who's on social media that is producing anything, creating anything, they're all out there saying, oh, I've launched a Substack. I've launched a this. I've launched a that. Come support me. If you appreciate what we're doing, if you're listening on the regular, and things have changed. It's a challenging, interesting time for this kind of media because so much of it nowadays is really supported by the individual creators. There are a few people out there, the celebrities and stuff like that, that are doing shows or podcasts or creators, and they already had income to be able to support that. But a lot of your favorite creators and podcasters are doing it out of their own pocket. And so if you are interested in supporting us, we're just going to put out there, right, the general support, like everyone else is saying. We're not putting out a Substack. That is like, no, but we do have the Patreon community. You can come join us. We do lives and things like that. There are different membership levels. There's a basic just support membership level. If you're like, yo, I love you ladies and I like listening to your podcast, but I am not paying $5 a month to support you because I just do not freaking have that in the budget right now. Are you not paying attention to the economics? We are. If you want to just throw us a thank you, one-off kind of thing, we also have Buy Me a Coffee, which is a really easy place to just do like a quick thing. I think it has also subscription support there too, but whatever, we would just appreciate it. We're doing a lot of things and we spend a lot of time in this. And again, we're doing it because we want to. We want to help people. We want to help homeschoolers. We want to help build this community, whether we're over on Patreon doing our lives and having conversations and stuff there, or we're in some of your favorite homeschool groups and offering advice and trying to be a resource there, whether we're doing our paid coaching, just between all of those things, we're doing so much. It really is a part-time job. Some weeks and months, it's a full-time job. And so we would appreciate your support.
Yes, we would. Yes, yes, yes. All right. So we've talked a lot about problems. They're there. There's a lot of them. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Amanda has probably put more time and energy into what homeschool regulations might look like. She's also homeschooled with more regulation than I ever have. She homeschools through the California charter system. I've homeschooled in states where there's quote unquote regulations, but they're such bullshit regulations that they might as well not even exist. And then places like Texas where they didn't even know my kids existed. So yeah, we've had very different journeys. So I'm curious if you have a vision of what a solid balance between homeschooling freedom and homeschooling regulation would look like, because that's where I'm stuck. Not to put all the pressure on you to fix all of these problems, Amanda, but if you could fix all of these problems, that would be great.
That'd be great. Look, I'm not trying to fix any problems, but I will say from my perspective, I think a couple things absolutely need to happen. I think that the idea of registering every year that you live somewhere, that your kids live with you, and that you are homeschooling should be a perfectly appropriate thing.
I'm
I
with you on that. I'll go with that. Sure.
Yeah, I don't see, I mean, I see these people online. I watched one of them last night in our rabbit hole, John Oliver thing, where someone was like, I don't think the government needs a list of everyone. And I was like, I do. I live in a developed first world country. And I think that fundamentally that's one of those things. Like people should be registered in a way that we know where they are. And if you have moved or you left or the worst has happened with one of your children, there should be a way to be able to see that and flag that. Like, what do you mean this family lost a child? Like, they have one less child that they're homeschooling. Where did that child go? A way to address that is
Hmm.
this annual form that maybe does have to be verified in some kind of way to make sure that a child isn't just no longer in the family. And people can be like, well, what happened there? Where did that child go? Like,
Hmm.
for better or worse, there are people who have created the situation where that needs to happen. And I don't think that we should have an issue with anyone wanting to make sure that we still have the number of people in our family that we started out with.
I watch enough true crime on Netflix that my brain is going to all the places that those kids did end up. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not good.
Right. I mean, it's that thing. Yeah. Okay. It's because of a few bad apples, but I don't see why we should have an issue protecting children from a few bad apples. I just don't. For me, I think that there should be some type of regular assessment. I don't think that it needs to be as hardcore or as intense as it is in New York, but I think that something along the lines of kind of a set, I'm trying to think like the best way to put it, because I don't think that kids in homeschooling need to pass a test that kids in public school can't pass. I don't think that it should be about whether or not you're passing a test. I think it should serve two purposes. The first would be to show that on this test, you are making consistent progress. It's not about whether or not you've passed. It's about whether or not you did better this year or next year than you did the year before.
You're
And
looking at
one year,
growth.
exactly, one year to the next is not necessarily enough for concern. But if you have 2 years in a row where there hasn't been progress, there hasn't been growth, then it's like, okay, something is not right here. And we need to be looking at what's happening in this family a little bit more closely. And then the second part would again be if you had a standardized assessment that worked off of established and recognized facts, those kids who are not taught those well recognized facts would probably be taught at least some of them, even if they are taught in the way of, okay, look, the crazy liberal society says this, so you need to learn these few things to be able to pass your test. But this is what we believe. Fine, at least they were exposed to them. And at some point, they're going to be grown-ups and they can access more information around that if they want. And if they're in a family that doesn't do that, but they still have to take some sort of a standardized test of sorts, and they see those questions on the test, it's going to be a seed that gets planted. And again, maybe they can't do anything with it as long as they're in their parents' home and they're living under their roof. But at some point, they will hopefully have enough freedom to be able to access materials, whether it's just from the web in general or from a trusted pastor or from an organization like Coalition for Responsible Home Education. They're really big on the fact that they have mentors who have been through similar situations and they have resources on their website. I just think it's important for there to be something that makes sure those seeds get planted and the kids who aren't being exposed to anything else are at least giving the chance to know, like, oh, there is something else out there. And now my parents say that we shouldn't know anything about it and it's bad and that. And so, okay, but at least there was some exposure.
I'm game for those things. You haven't lost me. So far, so good.
I will say, realistically, I think the idea of any sort of standardized assessment for homeschoolers is decades away. I mean, we can't even get basic, every kid should be registered and kids shouldn't be able to be pulled out and homeschooled while their parents or their caregivers in the middle of an active abuse investigation. Like, I would hope anyone who's listening to us knows that I 100% support those kind of laws. If you are in the middle of an active abuse investigation, you shouldn't be able to pull your kid out and be like, now you can never see them again. I've put them behind a veil of protected parental rights and you no longer have access to the child I was abusing. Like, no.
I will say there's probably people out there who have only homeschooled in one state, which is probably quite typical. Not everybody has lived the whacked out life of a corporate person that my husband has dragged us all over the country. So I will say I've had experience with different states and different regulations. And so, for example, like in Florida, you have to do a portfolio review, which in theory, you would be like, okay, that's how I'm measuring growth. The problem is any certified teacher can do a portfolio review and they charge 25, 50, whatever per portfolio review. And you're getting your letter. I mean, as long as you show up and the kid is breathing and says, I read a book, you're getting your letter for the county.
That's it. I've seen those posts.
Yeah.
I've seen the worst of those posts. The ones that are like, oh, this person doesn't care what you've done.
Yeah.
They'll rubber stamp you. Like
you're getting your letter no matter what. I mean, yeah. And then in North Carolina, we had to administer a standardized test, but I've talked about it on the podcast. I would give the cat untimed online at home. My kids would sit there and joke through it and eat snacks and take 2 weeks to take it. And they're like, whatever, we have to do this because the state says we have to do this. But you never submit the results to anyone. No one looks at them. So some states kind of have these quote unquote safeguards, but they're not safeguards. They're not doing anything. They're not protecting kids at all.
Yeah. And I mean, it's the thing for me. I don't even necessarily have an issue with the way that your kids did their test. If the regulation is just that, because if nothing else, it shows that the kids knew how to look up answers. They knew how to find the information they needed and they were exposed to things that they hadn't before. And so if they had an interest or at some point they wanted to go there, they get that exposure. The problem that I have is why were those not submitted, especially in this day and age? It is not hard to write a program that you just upload it on a website and it goes in. And at some point, someone gets an email that says, like, 3 years in a row, this family hasn't submitted their tests, or 3 years in a row, nothing has changed or improved for these tests. Like they're clearly doing ABC, 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 and it didn't work. It's not hard if it's just a standardized ABC test. I would be hesitant to do a lot of writing kind of things because we're seeing a lot of issues with AI and a lot of kids who write things and work really hard getting flagged as AI. There's a lot of issues there. But at the same time, again, we're decades away from seeing this kind of regulation. So that might not be an issue at all by the time we get anywhere close to having any kind of quality regulation around it.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, I agree. I'm with you on your plan. And most other countries don't run that way. Most other countries are less individualistic than the United States are. Most other countries have an overall societal outlook as opposed to I'm going to do whatever the fuck I want to with my kids. And it doesn't matter how it affects everyone else. And it doesn't even matter how it affects my kids. It's just, it's what I want to do. And so it's a pickle. I'm with you. So
Yeah. And I mean, the thing is there are conservative Christians in every first world developed country, and they still have to send them to some sort of school for the most part. And it might be a private school, but there's still that general oversight and regulation. And I do think before we're actually able to pass quality regulation, we as progressive homeschoolers can absolutely be pushing for things where kids are allowed more access to safe adults and more access to mandatory reporters. Things like advocating for after school clubs and extracurricular sports and, like school based Bible studies, like I think if we can find a way to make sure that homeschool kids are more integrated in those kinds of programs that already exist, we do address a lot of these things. And it might not be the kid that actually gets to go to the after school Bible study that is the one that we're worried about, but it could be one of their friends who says, hey, I go to church with this kid and I don't think our youth leader is worried about it or going to do anything about it, but I think there's a problem. And for them to have some kind of safe adult outside of their small bubble, I just see how that's a bad thing.
mhm. Yeah. All right. I'm more with you than you might have thought I would have been at the beginning of the episode. I get it. It has to happen. It does. It's just, I've been very spoiled of being like, I know what I'm doing. My kids are happy. My kids are growing. My kids are thriving. Leave me alone. But it's not about me.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, we're not talking about sacrificing massive things for the greater good, but there is a greater good responsibility component there, especially if you're a progressive homeschooler.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
surely you're covering that in other areas of your education as well.
Yeah. All right, peeps. Well, we will leave you with this. Our mantra for the week: homeschooling works best when freedom is paired with responsibility. Protecting kids and respecting families shouldn't be an either or. It should be a yes and. So
Yeah.
we would love to know what you think in the comments.
Would we? This is going to be one of the ones where they really come after me, but okay.
Dare she say I did test my children, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Yeah.
We shall see. It'll be interesting.
Yep.
All right, everyone, let us know what you think. And until next time, happy homeschooling.
Yeah. Try to have a good one.